At the end of time, not much remains. The ash stretches far, but if you search far enough, you can find two battling over nothing at all. It's quite a long fight, and the two trade blows. One wins and goes to loot the other. What they find is intriguing. The Crucifix of the Mad King seems to just be a halberd at first, but there's something wrong with it. After some experimenting, the weapon's function is discovered. Slam malformed corpse into the ground to briefly awaken it. Then fillet with a strong attack to trigger a roar, a blessing, or vexation. The roar is an AoE attack. The blessing imbues us with poise. And vexation, well, it's not very helpful. Wait, I'm telling the story out of order. Let's start from the beginning. Our character looks a little different now, but we start in the Cemetery of Ash. The actual weapon art requires 2 attacks to trigger, and the first one does a normal attack amount of damage. So needless to say, we're gonna try to avoid using that to deal damage. Although, that's not always possible. We can do some simple soul farming by killing the Crystal Lizard, and our first real test isn't too far off. Gundyr is rather slow for a boss, and while the boss is turning or recovering, we have enough time to use our weapon art. And we get pretty decent luck. The Vexation can actually be helpful for us, since we can dodge the explosion, dealing pretty good dark damage to our enemy. Phase 2 is only easier, and after refilling our MP with an Ashen Estus, we take out Gundyr, and the world has now opened up to us. Now, continuing through the final parts of this area, we work in tandem with the king to knock the Swordmaster off the edge for some more souls. We then wander into Firelink, and see the Shrine Handmaid, who sells us a Prism Stone, and a large leather shield. We then run out to this side of Firelink, where we can climb onto the roof, and kill this Crystal Lizard for a Twinkling Titanite. We then walk back into Firelink, but from above. This brings us to Snuggly, who we can trade with. In specific, we'll trade the Prism Stone and shield we just bought from the Shrine Handmaid for 2 more Twinkling Titanite, as well as grab the Estus Shard here. Over here? Who's saying that? The wall. You want me to hit it? Oh, well, that works, I guess. And that leads us to the Silver Serpent Ring, or increased soul gain. We go to say hi to Andre, and use our Estus Shard to bring us to 2 Ashen Estus and 3 regular, just so we can get a few more attacks out of our weapon, since our main damage dealer takes MP. We also upgrade our weapon to +2 with the Titanite we've gathered, just to give us any edge we can. We then level up as much as we can, increasing our MP and our equip load. Now, we've run out of things to do here, which means we have nowhere to go but Highwall. Highwall is our first real experience with lots of enemies, and having lots of enemies to kill with minimal MP requires us to strategize in different ways than we would if we were fighting a boss. So, with individual enemies being a whole different beast, we can come up with things like using AoEs to hit multiple enemies, or using the fillet of the weapon art to stun tougher enemies like the Mimic, who we can then kill for souls. We can also run out of MP pretty easily, in which the fillet, is it fillet? Like, what does it even mean? Isn't that like a steak? Or like a fish? Or like a kind of like chop? I thought it was like a swing. I don't know, dude. In which the fillet ceases to be very powerful at all. We have to use it to light this bonfire, but it's obviously something I don't really want to rely on. The way we have to wait for explosions, or get good luck with an AoE roar, leads us to play very methodical. Slow when we aren't about to blow, but the moment that timer starts ticking, we start to move in hopes of catching someone. Eventually, we're able to clear out the armory, and grab the Cell Key, and Estus Shard. We give ourselves a 3rd Ashen Estus with the Shard, and run down to Vort. Vort is actually weak to dark damage, so though he dies fast, this is good practice for later. Vort likes to run, but there is plenty of downtime between attacks, or while he's charging something for us to strike, and kill Vort. Oh, and kill Vort. First try. Then, we head to Emma for her banner. Well, we grab the banner from what used to be Emma, and free Greirat, before heading back to Firelink. Leonhard is in Firelink, and he already knows we're here to take his mask. It's a long fight, but with lots of vexation, we're able to kill him for our mask. Then we level up MP and health some more, before getting taken to the Undead Settlement. The first thing we do, well, after we take the dogs out, is talk to Yoel, who will hopefully be useful for later. The enemies here are either not worth it to take out, or are easily able to be ran past. So we just grab things like the Estus Shard, the Covenant, and the Undead Bone Shard, and then we're to the Wood. And honestly, since the Wood only takes massive damage at set points, we end up hoping for Vexation. Since the Wood is slow, we can easily dodge the explosion and destroy the Wood. Then we continue to explode every enemy in our way, including the Boreal Knight and the Demon with Siegmeyer, before we grab our armor and the Chloranthy ring right here. Then we move forward through the short road of sacrifices. Instead of just moving on though, we'll use this as an opportunity to talk about a lot of NPC shenanigans. We send Greirat off on his first journey, as well as meeting Henri and leveling from Yoel all at the same time. Now, we can run through the Crucifixion Woods, grabbing the Grass Crest Shield before we take on the Crystal Sage. According to the worst wiki ever, the Sage is weak to everything but magic, for some reason. Despite this, we've opted out of leveling for damage scaling, for some stupid reason. I mean, it was because it would make hitting the first attack too rewarding, but whatever. But this means the Sage is really difficult, and we don't do enough damage to progress further than Phase 2 in this fight, and we especially don't do it quick enough. So, we run through the other section of the woods in order to kill a couple guys with gravity, and head down to Farron Keep. There's a couple of Estus upgrades along with the horrible poison that we somehow managed to not inflict on ourselves. We then climb up this ladder, where we find another Crystal Lizard for our Twinkling Titanite, and the Stray Demon, which is good practice for our spacing, even if he's easy. He drops a lot of souls though, and we can use the Dream Chaser's Ashes to buy a Hidden Blessing, and the Tower Key, which gets us our last piece of armor, and the Estus Ring, for better Estus recovery. Now, back to the Sage. The fight starts out simpler than most. You have to work out where the Sage is, and how to approach her while she berates you with magic. It's still easy though, since she's slower than us, and still takes an amount of damage to our attacks. But once she reaches half health, Phase 2 comes up. Many clones will now appear along with the Sage, and while the magic output of one individual Sage is slow and easy to manage, when lots more come around, it's a bit tougher. We can try to just rush the main Sage, but Vexation, our main damage dealer, will never go off. It takes a while, and when we hit the Sage to hopefully trigger it, she leaves before it even comes close to going off. The solution to this is to preload our Vexation, and run at the Sage as a kind of ticking time bomb. And doing this a couple times leads to the Sage going down. We make our way into the Cathedral, grabbing some Twinkling Titanite along the way, then head back to Firelink to level Faith, to increase our dark damage specifically. We then attempt to blow everyone up for this Estus Shard. And grab a couple more Twinkling Titanite. And can now upgrade our weapon to +3, and allot our Estus to 5 each. We then head through the graveyard for an Undead Bone Shard, and traverse the rooftops for a quick route to inside the Cathedral. Lloyd's Sword Ring, a personal favorite, is here, and so is Patches, or Siegmeyer, or I don't know. We buy some armor, and throw it down a well, before heading to the Deacons. Just for clarification, it's really hard not to hit someone with our first attack here, so we just settle for not hitting the main Deacon. We use our Vexation preloading strategy here too. Just trigger it once, and stall until it explodes. And in this case, it actually kills most of the Deacons, making the fight more like a 5-on-1 instead of a 1-on-5 million. Phase 2 is more of the same, just with one target instead of different ones. Actually, it's a bit easier, since the main Deacon makes the tall ones cast darkness to nowhere all the time. After this, we get enough souls that we can level Vigor and Faith quite a bit. And now, since it's time to head back to Farron Keep, the Abyss Watchers are a short walk away. The Abyss Watchers are quite a unique boss in that they actually get stunned when we hit them, which means if we can get the timing right, we can attack safely. Unfortunately, getting in right is an issue. We usually either damage trade, or just get hit. There are multiple Watchers though, and they turn the fight way more scrappy than it has any right to be. Despite this, with the help of the other Watcher, we make it to Phase 2. We die, but it doesn't take much to make it back there, and Phase 2 is a lot different. Since there's just one, the fight is a lot slower, and requires quite a bit of patience. Trading damage is pretty common, and to an extent is even positive for us, since the Watcher has such little health. Eventually, with enough roars and enough vexation, we do one last damage trade for the win. Back in Firelink, we level up a couple times and move Henri's quest along. The catacombs are pretty uneventful. Some Twinkling Titanite, an Undead Bone Shard, the usual. Wolnir is finally up, and the boss with such a bad reputation is actually a little bit of a challenge on this run. See, Wolnir gets a lot harder the longer the fight goes on. He summons skeletons, then he gets a sword, then he summons bone wheels, then he summons tougher skeletons, all while he slowly crawls to the top of the arena, which spreads the fog to a point that it covers the entire arena, and the fight becomes unwinnable. Wolnir is still usually super easy because you can just kill him fast, but with this weapon art, we do little damage, and have trouble popping his bracelets. He summons skeletons, and gets his sword before we pop his first one. The other two, though, take damage from Vexation together, so when we explode, the fight moves along pretty quick, and after a couple minutes, Wolnir goes down. We start on the journey through Irithyll, killing Pontiff's Beast, but we stop at the bonfire and head back to Greirat, who goes on a second expedition. We level up and head down to the Smoldering Lake, where the invisible demon from last time is now visible, meaning that the fight is easy and we get quite a few souls. Horus is further into the Smoldering Lake, and he's actually pretty smart. The main kicker, get it, is that while we're trying to blow him up, he kicks us before we can dodge, hitting us both. We still end up victorious because, well, duh, but he was interesting. We grab the rest of the Estus upgrades from this place, and head to the Old Demon King. The Old Demon King is pretty clunky, actually. He mostly moves us around, trying to hit us, but we don't even have to dodge his attacks, usually. So, the Battle of Kings ends with our final Mad King's Folly, for a really, really easy and barely noteworthy fight. Greirat is back again, thanks to us saving Siegmeyer, and he brings with him a hidden blessing, and some Twinkling Titanite we'll buy when we can afford it. Into Irithyll, the enemy fights laid out here are done, so we run past them. Once we make it to the Church of Yorshka, we head back to the catacombs, and then we lead Henri along to this church as well. We talk to him, and acknowledge the one in the corner. We continue to the distant manor, and to Irithyll Dungeon. The area is largely uneventful, save for two mimics. One gets us an Estus Shard, and one weird one past some basilisks to get us the Dark Clutch Ring, which should power us up quite a bit. We then let the jailers get us down to, 1 health, before making it to the Profaned Capital. With this, we now have access to enough Twinkling Titanite to get a +4 weapon. 2 in the Profaned Capital, 1 we missed in Irithyll, and 2 from Greirat for a +4 weapon. But we can get a +5. By heading to the DLC now, we have a couple potential Titanite slabs. One comes from beating Phase 2 of Frida, and that's fine and dandy. You could do that if you wanted, but I would rather die than I kill Frida before my second Lord of Cinder. But, by breaking this bridge, and going deep, deep into the Painted World, we can fight this thing. And once we kill it, a ladder drops down behind us. And after climbing the longest ladder to ever exist, oh come on, 2? We get a free Titanite slab, and upgrade to +5, just so we can take on Yorm. For Yorm, The fight is pretty standard without the Storm Ruler, just slow. For once, we actually don't really want Vexation, as the timing of when it explodes doesn't line up with any good opportunities for damage. So, anytime we get the Roar, we celebrate, as well as riposting once we've stunned him, since otherwise we don't do enough damage to kill him with all of our magic. But it only takes a while, and Yorm eventually goes down. Then, we head back to Irithyll. After the worst staircase ever, Pontiff is up. And Pontiff is difficult without parrying. And we don't, since we can't riposte. But you riposted Yorm! Shut up, it's my run. Yorm is nigh impossible without parrying, while Pontiff is actually pretty okay, if not hard. We can stun him with a Roar, or an Explosion, and he takes decent damage from our follies, enough so that in Phase 2, the clone gets destroyed, and so does Pontiff, for an easy first try. Then, it's time for Anor Londo, where we, kill Henri, and grab an Estus Shard to take on Aldrich. Aldrich is slow, but also punishing. If we aren't free to hit him, we're losing most of our health. And we only have so many heals, so we have to play it right. Sometimes, Aldrich gets stuck doing the same thing, and even though we know what he's doing, we still get hit and die sometimes. Vexation still isn't our preferred reward from the list, since Aldrich moves so much he's usually teleporting, or teleported away by the time we explode. We eventually get him though, and go straight to Dancer, no rests. Dancer is the first instance of Vexation actually killing us, since we were too busy trying to dodge her to dodge it. But, other than that, Dancer is fairly squishy, and the poise damage these weapon arts inflict stun her a lot. So, after some dumb decisions that should not have worked out, Dancer is down. And holy shit, I'm rich! We level Faith near the soft cap with these souls, which means our damage output isn't getting much higher. Now, we head down to the Consumed King's Garden. The way to Osiris is, well, rough, but Osiris is, well, also rough. Phase 1 is just a time waster for the real fight, and to that end, he stalls us out with Pestilent Mist. Once Phase 2 comes around, throw any chance at Vexation out the window because of how much he moves. Not that we can't hit him, because we can. It's just that the days of both you and the boss waiting for something to explode is over. But the days of killing bosses has yet to end. Oh hey, we killed this guy already! Phase 1 of this guy just involves circling around him until we get a free hit, which usually doesn't take too long, since lots of his swings are purely vertical. But that's not the hard part. Phase 2 is when Champion Gundyr gains a large amount of speed, as well as new attacks that make it tricky to get hits in sometimes. Sometimes we gamble on the Roar AoE to kick in and stun Gundyr, and other times we have to use the verticality of the arena to avoid taking damage. And there are also the times where we just damage trade, or get hit for no reward, which leads to the situation of both me and Gundyr being one hit away from dying. A damage trade won't be good enough, so we have to kill him. It's a very careful kill, but it does happen, and we're victorious. The Flameless Shrine has our coiled sword fragment, and we use it to teleport out back to Irithyll Dungeon. Why are we here, I hear you asking? Well, we're here to go to Archdragon Peak. Have you even played this game before? Archdragon Peak is full of running, especially in the first boss arena. The Ancient Wyvern is all about how much you can run. We meet the standards, barely, and plunge the dragon pretty easily. The rest of this area is, well, useless is what it is. Like, there's genuinely nothing of note here. The King of the Storm, however, only comes out once provoked. Why do we bother him? Well, why wouldn't we? This wouldn't be an all boss run if I didn't. Phase 1 relies on mostly Vexation for us, but that's nothing we can't handle by now. Phase 2, well, Phase 2 is a bit annoying. It's hard to get a hit in. The only truly safe opportunities are those fake out second charge ups that are meant to catch greedy players. We end up getting Blessing during this fight like 4 times in a row, which is also annoying for being able to win. Our luck starts to turn around, but waiting and dodging every attack while waiting for 1 or 2 is annoying. But hit after hit, we slowly work each other down. and one of us has to be victorious. Now that we've taken on Archdragon Peak way before we were ever meant to, we're back in Lothric, and we're here to take on the Dragonslayer armor. The armor is annoying because getting it hidden isn't exactly allowed. That doesn't always stop us. We don't exactly have a good incentive to not hit this guy when he's trying to kill us. The times we can hit him are usually when he does a big vertical slam, or when he uses his shield to try and hit us. That brings me to another point. Trying to hit the armor and dodge him takes up just about all of our focus. So, when the Pilgrim Butterflies use lasers, or big projectiles, we usually get destroyed. But the Dragonslayer armor is easy enough compared to some of the bosses we've just fought. Then, the Grand Archives has our last Estus and Undead Bone Shard. The Twin Princes are the worst boss yet. The should-be final boss of the main game is just as hard as one would expect. Teleporting, mix-ups, and relentless aggression come out of this boss like it's nothing. That, on top of the insane damage output within our circumstances. Usually, getting hit hard wouldn't matter that much, but when one of our easiest ways to deal damage is through trading, we run out of heals really quickly. Even the most open openings don't have enough downtime for us. Instead, we have to dodge with clever positioning, because standing in the right spot leads to Lorien missing. Phase 2 is the same but worse, because Lothric joins Lorien, in which he gains new follow-ups and more health. Smashing my head against the wall is the only way to go, sadly, so we spend a couple hours dying and trying, before we get enough lucky dodges, free hits, and enough rolls of vexation to finally take out the Twin Princes. Now, we come back to the DLC from earlier, and this bonfire is actually right next to the Grave Tender. The way this fight goes is pretty simple. Explosion, riposte, riposte. We take the souls from that fight gladly, and run to Wilhelm. Wilhelm has interesting behavior that we can take advantage of. By spamming Heal Aid, a low-cost spell that we don't need, Wilhelm will cast Vow of Silence, locking him and us out from casting, and that means he doesn't get to heal. So, with some explosions, we take him down too. Then, enough running later, and we pull a lever to try Frida. Frida has quite a bit of downtime between her attacks in Phase 1, and even though she's still threatening in that downtime, if we can stun her, aka hit her, she'll hop away, and we'll move to Phase 2 pretty seamlessly. Phase 2 is also much easier, since Ariandel has such a big hitbox. In fact, if we roll Vexation, it's likely that we hit both Ariandel and Frida, which enables some massive damage, eventually putting us into Phase 3. Phase 3 is similar to Phase 1, just with a lot more damage for us to take if we mess up, and a lot faster paced. We trade some hits, and we both explode to beat Black Flame Frida. Now into the Dreg Heap. We drop down through most of the area, skipping the swamp entirely, and then we drop to the Demon Prince. This boss is pretty unremarkable. Fight the demon from below at first, neither when they're both active, and kill the demon in pain first to make Phase 2 easier. Phase 2 is really long since the Demon Prince has so much health, but his attacks aren't that threatening, and any vexation is sure to hit the boss, for the first try victory. Lots of the Ring City is also unremarkable, except for getting one-shotted by these guys. And after that, we come to the Bridge Midir, who, by himself, is impossible. Midir's dark resistance is off the charts, and since that's where all our damage scaling has gone, the fact that he's basically negating it makes the bridge boss really long, and that'd make the main boss even longer, so we just skip him. After all, one boss skip is okay, right? So we come to Half-Baked, where we explode a few times, and oh, we actually traded with Half-Light? Guess he's not so half-baked anymore. Then we move forward and accidentally cause the end of the world. And at the end of time, not much remains. The ash stretches far, But if you search far enough, you can find two, battling over nothing at all. It's quite a long fight, and the two trade blows. One hits hard, but gets stunned quickly. One is slow, and does the stunning. As the fight continues, one discovers what he was searching for, and gets stronger with each passing second. The other is under the Mad King's control. No matter how many times the other dies, it comes back for another fight. And one can only last so long against an immortal and unstoppable force. So, no matter how many deaths take place, one gets stunned, pushed to his limit, and eventually, he dies. Then, after the Cinders go on their thrones, the final challenge is upon us. The damage is a lot better than it was in the DLCs, obviously, and the Soul of Cinder is pretty easy to trade with. We hit each other until he becomes Gwyn, and Gwyn may have been a Mad King, but he was never the Mad King that we are now. And with him down, Lundor rules once more.